Okay, all right. Next story delves into the world of smart cities, the future of living. This is a project called The Line in Saudi Arabia, and essentially it puts together an entire city on scale into a line, essentially. So 9 million residents will be living in this thing when it's completed. It's massive, and it stretches across a vast land in a line. It looks very, very futuristic. Obviously, this is a CGI video, right? This is not showing what it actually looks like. It's a concept, but they're trying to make neighborhoods that are 5 minutes, so you don't have to walk around everywhere. Everything's local, everything's together. You can travel from one end to the other end in 20 minutes. Obviously, the fastest way to go from point A to point B is a straight line, hence the concept. And they're trying to make it very, very environmentally friendly, with autonomous services and vehicles and eco-friendly and no emissions. The flying around CGI part is obviously marketing and hype for this video, right? But you've got to have a little bit of it. It's massive, 170 and mirror glass facade. I feel really sorry for the birds that might fly into this thing, if there are any birds in that desert. But I mean, it looks cool. It looks interesting. It definitely looks very futuristic and sci-fi. But a lot of these projects often stay visions for forever and they never actually get executed on. They are starting to do construction on this. It's definitely underway, but it'll be interesting to see if they can actually pull it off and make it a reality. But this is The Line, one of the new wonders of the world. Okay, what's your perspective? We'll start with yourself, Mikhail. When you see that clip, when you see this news, what comes to mind?
I think as a software engineer, my first sort of reaction is you learn over time that if you're going to start a project, and a large project, you want to solve at most 1 to 2 difficult problems. You don't want to start by saying, I'm going to solve 10, right? So when we say 100% renewables, we say one of the top 15 tallest buildings in the world, we say the longest building in the world, the most densely populated city in the world, with some of the fastest high-speed rail in the world, you're starting to solve a lot of very difficult problems all at the same time. Yeah. And that, I think, for me, creates a lot of doubt about the successful sort of outcomes that are possible here. Additionally, I'm sort of a market person, and I think when you try to manufacture demand, that can be problematic, right? So in China, they've built cities, and a lot of them are relatively empty. Yeah. So I would speculate that, this is probably a luxury property. Do you have 9 million people with the relative wealth that's going to be required to live there who are just jumping at the bit to move to the desert? Questionable, perhaps.
So you're skeptical. You think the man who chases 2 rabbits catches none. They're trying to do too many things, and ultimately it may not work for those reasons.
I think effectively that's my stance, yeah. But what I would have loved to see in this is something like distributed energy resources. Yeah. Right. I come from an energy sort of supply background. I spent a few years working in that industry, and I think that's something that's really important when you're looking at 100% renewables. Like, you can't just say, I'm going to consume 100% renewables. You have to also say, how are we going to balance the grid when we're going to feed a city with 100% renewables?
9 million
they
people.
Needed. Yeah, exactly. Like all of that storage, all of those buildings, like you have so many potentials for energy storage, for grid balancing technology, and there was none of that in the materials that I've seen so far. And that could have been extremely interesting, right? That's a space in technology that needs to be solved, like really needs to be solved for the future. High-speed rail, like, okay, sure, great. Yeah. But distributed energy resources, that would solve a world problem. I know that they are making huge strides in hydrogen, etc., in the Saudi, so they're doing fantastic things, but this would have been, I think, a big win.
Okay. So. Harry, what's your take on this story?
Yeah, well, as a massive sci-fi enthusiast, I think just looking at the marketing video, I'm like, wow, I'd like to go and try and live there. Yeah, that looks quite fun. If it ends up looking like that, and I don't know, maybe it'd be a fun place to go and stay and check it out. But who knows? Could you live there? I think there's a thing with these kind of like creating cities and new towns. Like the best thing about living in London, for example, is some of the history and the culture you've got, and how much can you manufacture that straight away? And I don't know. I think that would be very difficult to do, especially if there's only a bunch of rich people living there. That might be quite boring. But I think as a vision, as like a CEO of a business, and working in quite a complex piece of technology, you can't fault them for that. That's pretty cool. And even if they get 25% of the way there, then it's on some of those bold things that Miguel's talking about. Then they're making a step forward, basically. So I don't know. I respect it, and I'm quite keen to see how it develops.
I'm certainly rooting for it as well. As a sci-fi fan, I'm really hoping they can pull it off. I definitely have the same doubts that you have to a degree. I mean, I've seen these types of projects come and go, but will be interesting to see what happens. Fred, what's your take on The Line?
Yeah, I think I have a certain level of skepticism as well, and to disclose, I have a friend actually who's working on the project as a technology and data manager and managing a large team. It's definitely audacious. It's definitely running into challenges on budget. But remember, there are examples of cities being built in the desert. One is Las Vegas.
Dubai.
Dubai. Are they successful? In some sense, I would definitely say yes. It took many decades. And there are examples of planned cities and even planned countries. If you look at a place like Singapore, and in terms of attracting wealth and people from all over the world. I think the location of this and the fact that it's Saudi and the politics, and I'm sorry to say the religion that's involved and the control, I think are going to be large barriers. Because if you look at successful cities, attracting a diversity of talent, a diversity of professions, creative and artists, and people who have dissenting views, I'm not sure if those are all in line with the values and the kind of controls that are being put on this particular project. But again, it is exciting to see, and even if it achieves 20 or 30%, as Ari say, I think it'll be quite an achievement.
Would you guys be open to going there and maybe staying for a trip, or even perhaps living there? Would you be open to the idea after it's all, if they achieve that vision? Would you be open to I guess both, going there for a trip or living there? What do you think, Fred?
Trip, definitely, because I'm naturally curious, and I think it'd be super interesting to see. Living there, I think with some of the political and other control and privacy issues, I would have to think really hard about.
It's a shame it's not in London. I get what you're saying, right? I'd probably say the same. I mean, they're kind of missing a trick. I'm sure they have like hotels and Airbnbs and stuff in there, but that would be like the coolest Airbnb ever, like to stay in this sort of setup. What about you, Harry? Would you be open to living there, trip? What's your perspective?
Yeah, definitely. I'll go check it out. No doubt, it would be really interesting to see. I think generally we are having to rethink about how humans sort of interact and live in the world, and this could be quite a futuristic way of seeing that. So you might get a little bit of a glimpse of the future, and that's quite exciting.
And Mikkel, would you be open to moving, living, staying? What's your perspective on that?
I think possibly, yeah. As a curious person, it would be interesting to see it. We have an interesting perspective on history around like what is a wonder of the world, right? Like we're not building and thinking of things as a new wonder of the world, and I think we probably should. Like that's an audacious thing to build, and if it's successful, I think that's a wonder of the world. So would I want to see it? Yes. Would I want to live there? Probably, to Fred's point, no. Especially looking at it from a humanitarian perspective, right? There's 20,000 people being displaced by it.
Yeah.
There's been 3 people sentenced to death for protesting it. There's been a person killed by the Saudi security already for expressing his views on social media. So probably not.
I love the project. It's amazing. You guys are doing a great job on it. I think I respect that it's like a moonshot from a tech perspective. Obviously, I agree with the human rights side of the coin, but just from a pure technical perspective, it's great to see people trying to be brave and build big projects, regardless of if they're going to be successful or not. It's definitely bold and ambitious, isn't it? So it'd be cool to track this one and see where it goes.